All right, guys, welcome back to AI Insights and Innovation, where we talk about the realities of AI and how to make it work within your enterprise. I'm your host, Dave Linthicum, author, speaker, B-list geek, and I'm excited today. Again, we're going to start the interviews in 2025 and in 2024, but kicking off these interviews with some of the thought leaders out there, I had to invite my good friend, previous colleague, Diana Kearns-Manolatos. So Diana is the lead, she leads the U.S. and global research on technology transformation. Her research primarily supports important issues facing clients, such as AI strategy, cloud, and cyber business. And she differentiates her insights, actually gets into some very thoughtful questions and how you answer it with major market technology, cultural questions to support the growth of strategy, for this large growing business going forward. And, just to tell the audience, I worked with Diana at Deloitte, and she's absolutely a dream to work with. And she's the one who was insights behind, anything that I came up that looked like I was brilliant. Diana actually probably created that, wasn't me. And so what I used to joke at Diana, it's like she would do the work and we just all put our names on it. But the reason I kind of honed in on Diana when I was at Deloitte was the thoughtful research behind it. So it wasn't just coming out with general information around growth statistics. I can get those from other organizations, but what it meant. In other words, why it was growing, cultural issues, what was blocking it. And when you deal with clients, there's dynamics and personalities and, other drivers that people don't understand. It's never as simple as we kind of make it out to be. And the technology marketplace, is just like that. And so I was just enamored with her work. So I'm so happy to have you here. Why don't you give a short introduction as to what you do during your day?
Yeah, thanks so much, David, for having me. And we miss you at Deloitte, but I'm glad to be able to talk with you in this capacity. So as you mentioned, I'm part of the research team here, a group called the Center for Integrated Research. And really what we do is we look at market issues that are impacting organizations across all industries. And within the team, as you mentioned, lead our technology transformation research. And there's no shortage of technologies people are looking to invest in today. AI, cloud, edge computing, IoT, cybersecurity capabilities, and quantum computing, so many more. And I'm, really looking at what the current state of maturity is of those technologies, how people are applying and using them to solve strategic problems for their businesses, and how they could do that perhaps better or more cost effectively to gain ROI from them. So that's a lot of what my research focuses on. I think we in technology like to joke these days that there's no shortage of viewpoints on AI and generative AI. And so as a researcher, it can be a fun challenge to think about some thought-provoking and provocative questions that haven't yet been asked and answered. So that's usually where I start my research, is thinking about a question or a hypothesis on a topic and how we can use data, whether that's qualitative or quantitative, to ask and answer that question. So glad to be talking about some of our new research today.
Yeah, the research is fantastic. And like I said, it gets into different dimensions. And as a blogger, someone who creates content and do the thought leader stuff and writing books and things like that, it's absolutely the fuel to make those things happen, because you have to have data. And everything I come up with, my opinions and the people who I read, they have to have data to back up the opinions. It's one thing to say, hey, AI is going to be helpful. Well, how is it helpful? How do you make it work? What models do you deploy? What methodologies do you move forward? Are we too technologically focused? Are we going to get to a continuous learning AI state in the future? And those are the more important questions that I think the CIOs and the line managers and people who are trying to make this stuff work are asking right now. So one of the recent reports that you wrote, Bridging Measurement Divides in AI, Cloud, and Cyber, which I will put a link down below, but it's one of many. I urge you to follow Diana on LinkedIn. She's a consummate poster, and she posts very thoughtful stuff and gets her reports out there as well, and also appears on other podcasts, things like that. And we really enjoy reading her stuff. But what's interesting about this report was that it got into certain dynamics that I think that other research didn't get into. namely looking at things like value disparities. The report highlighted a significant gap between how business and technology leaders perceive the value of generative AI. Absolutely an imperative, and it's great that you're talking about that. So, what specific strategies did you recommend? Do you recommend for aligning these perceptions to maximize investments in AI technology after doing the report and during the research?
So the biggest thing is the data shows that business and technology leaders are not on the same page. Surprise, surprise, about what they're trying to achieve from technology investments. So, and we can get into where some of those disparities are in the data, but the answer to what they can be doing is really working to close that gap. And that comes through communications, of what the business is actually trying to achieve from a strategic perspective, in one direction, and from the technology leaders, what they see as the maturity, the capabilities, the blockers in terms of infrastructure or data, of that technology's ability to be able to achieve those things. So there's a communication aspect here of getting on the same page about what the objectives are for the business, as well as what's possible with the technology. And then I think beyond communication, the second thing is really having a holistic and consistent way to set and then measure against achieving those objectives. So um, that gets into this issue of technology value and return on investment. When we're talking about AI these days, every conversation that I'm a part of is how do we make sure that if we're investing in these technologies, we gain value from them? And that's something that both business and technology leaders care about. But one of the biggest things that our research showed, given we have a consistent KPI framework, with 5 value categories and 46 KPIs, we're able to use survey data from almost 3,000 companies investing in Gen AI, around the expected benefits, and from 1,600 companies that are investing in AI more broadly, and start to then look at consistently where those gaps are.
Yeah, and it's I think it's the fundamental barrier to us moving AI forward right now, as we talked about in the show. And I'm seeing data that comes from other organizations, which aligns with the results that you have in your report. The inability to find probably are the your capability of finding the right ROI use case within the enterprises where people are struggling now, and so they're figuring out how to match their business, whatever they're doing, retail, manufacturing, sports equipment, automobiles, whatever, and the utilization of AI, and also they're taken back by the price tag of it. So in other words, these things are going to be water cooled GPU based systems, even if you're using cloud or on-prem.
Yeah.
You're talking about a significant investment in infrastructure and getting the compute power that you need, and also the people that you need to make this stuff happen. And so it just seems like we're in. I think some of the organizations out there are calling it a pilot death spiral, because everybody's out there trying it, and it's not necessarily working. Up to 80% of the projects, is according to McKinsey, may be struggling to get into production. Now, eventually, I think we're going to make it. This kind of reminds me of cloud computing back in 2008, 2009. I just saw a lot of false projects that were launched, and big, massive migrations. And it took us a while to figure out where the value proposition was for that particular technology. Same sort of thing with AI, but the stakes are higher here. So in other words, we're able to, using this technology, create an innovative differentiator for our business. It's able to really kind of define our business. And we see companies around now, some of the newer, cooler startups that are leveraging AI as a core strategic differentiator. But I think pharmaceutical companies, tire companies, manufacturing companies, retail companies, healthcare companies, all these people leveraging this technology to a larger benefit. So when we talked about some of the KPIs and measurements that you used, um, you know, what was the importance of establishing these KPIs for evaluating the tech investments? Can you tell me what some of the emerging KPIs were that you looked at? Why did you move toward them? What kind of stuff or data that you got out of this report that kind of excited you, that said, well, that's something new. That's something I didn't understand before I did this research.
So the first thing is, let's break it up into two different pieces, because generative AI and traditional AI are two very different things. So taking generative AI first, to be clear, there is huge potential there. Our research shows that organizations are gaining benefits from Gen AI today to do things like reduce cost, grow revenue, and accelerate innovation, and a lot more. But I think, as you suggested, there's also big investment in these technologies and huge expectations around the opportunity. So for Gen AI, what we did is we looked at 11 different potential benefits. And so those range from things like reducing cost and improving efficiency, to other beneficial areas specific to the technology, like uncovering new ideas or insights, improving products, and doing things like detecting fraud and managing risk. So we have this baseline of 11 benefits that we're looking at. And what kind of excited me the most about that was that, yes, most people agree that Gen AI can help you to reduce cost and improve efficiency. Business and technology leaders are pretty aligned with that. But what I was most surprised and excited to see was that there was a really significant gap, 34 percentage points, between what business and technology leaders thought about Gen AI and its potential to help detect fraud and manage risk. So on the one hand, the technology leaders, 67% of the almost 3,000 surveyed, felt that that was a benefit that they should be expecting from their Gen AI investments, and only 33% of the business leaders did. So, maybe the technology leaders know something that the business leaders don't about what some of the inherent capabilities are of the technology. Or on the other hand, maybe the business leaders are trying to achieve something quite different from the technology than what the technology leaders are. So that was the most interesting thing to me.
Yeah, I think ultimately this gets into, I think, the struggle that we're going to go through in 2025 and the ability to kind of gap the expectations between what it can actually do. And I think this may be a training problem or an education problem, at the end of the day, trying to explain, to an executive, which, I do all the time in terms of, what this stuff is and its value. It's much more, I realize in explaining it, it's much more complex than other past technologies. I could explain service oriented architecture, container based systems, container orchestration, all these things, which are kind of the cool tech, what the cool kids are working on. AI, and coming from a background in AI, I did AI when I was 18 years old. Did Lisp programming, understood what it is and understood the differences, the ability to build behavior and something that's going to have a dynamic change over time that you're not going to be necessarily supervising, versus a traditional application that's going to provide static decisions. In other words, it's going to do exactly what you program it to do. And it is a bit out of the cusp of people understanding the potential for this stuff. And I think that's why you see it applied. And probably we saw some of these failures. We saw prototypes where it was applied in areas that should have never been applied. So in other words, and one of the things I tell my generative AI architect students right now is always ask the question if AI is going to be the right solution, because it's going to be more expensive. It's going to take more time to make it happen. And we're going through finding the use cases now in case studies. And I'm finding, as I'm looking at it through the eyes of, someone who's going through these different case studies, not very straightforward in how we do it. And there's not a lot of people out there that I think can explain where the case studies are. I think you probably have a good deal of people at Deloitte that can do it. But, as far as people who are walking the planet, that are capable of doing this. And that's where the gap comes in right now. And I think that the expectations for this technology are very high. And I think they're changing over time. A couple of years ago, when the Gen AI stuff started to take off, actually, when I was at Deloitte, people were talking about let's build an LLM for banking, LLM for healthcare, LLM for automobile manufacturing. Okay, well, an LLM takes $12 million in 12 days to train. So not all businesses are going to be able to do that. And so, okay, we can't afford to do LLMs, so we're going to build small language models that have more tactical focus and agentic-based deployments. Well, what applications do you want to make that happen? And it's not always apparent. So where do you see us, your opinion, getting into the gap, moving some of the gaps closer? Is it going to be a training exercise? Is it just the evolution of technology? Is it going to take, hundreds of podcasts like this explaining how the technology works and how to use it? Is it going to take, tens of thousands of consultants, to go out there and work with businesses to make it happen. Is there any way we can accelerate that, I guess is the best way to put it?
Yeah, I do think it comes down to education to some extent, because in many of the conversations that I have, people don't really understand what generative AI is, even still now, right? And so, and what's different about it from traditional AI, which has been around for a long time. So, in terms of the education, I think a more pervasive understanding that, one, generative AI is a probabilistic technology. And so, really, what that means is you're taking a bunch of data and using it to train the model. And then the output gives you the probability, uh, a probability based result. And so that's the first thing, is it's only going to be good at those types of use cases, right? In terms of functional requirements. I think, the second thing is generative AI is a generative technology. It uses prompting as an input, which is kind of a new way of engaging with the technology. And the output is generated. And that's not always going to be text, even though I see many people think of the generated output as text, because chatbots and these agentic solutions are very commonplace and popular. And for many just everyday consumers, that is the only experience they have with it. But there's automated code that it can generate. There are images it can generate. There are 3D models it can generate. So I think, functionally, there's education around the variability of the generated outputs, as we start to think about use cases and applications as a second piece of that. And then I think the third piece of it is traditional AI, and when maybe it's better to use traditional AI versus generative AI, right? Because traditional AI approaches are deterministic and they require different types of training data and environments. Whereas generative AI, being probabilistic, requires you to put your data in a different format to be able to feed it into the model. And so I think that's, the final point of how do we get organizations to where they need to be more quickly. Some of our research, we surveyed this year 400 US organizations on where they're spending in terms of their technology. And what we've seen year over year, since we did this survey last year as well, is a major shift to data and platform spending. And that is really to be able to be successful with these technologies that require data to be fed into them. If you don't have the right data environment, architectures, and platforms in place to be able to be feeding models and doing these, large scale or even smaller scale computations that are needed, you're not going to get where you need to be as quickly as you want to.
Yeah, that is so true. And we talked about this in this podcast all the time. We call it the data wall. In other words, they don't have the data in hygienic shape and in the correct format, or even able to find a single source of truth within the data sets. And they were able to survive for many years in doing that. They created the technical debt. They kicked the data can down the road, so to speak, and it never was corrected. And now when you deal with the generative AI stuff, if you try to train these systems with it, and I've seen it happen, suddenly you're just going to get not a lot of value that comes out of the utilization of these things. And I always say junk goes in, you're going to get junk out. And so a lot of these corporations are stymied right now because they're looking at many multi-million dollars in getting their data just refactored into a better shape to make it consumable for you. I would argue that you get more advantages in having less error-prone data than you have, but it's a daunting proposition for companies that have been around for 150 years. I mean, collecting digital data for the last 75, and they have layers and layers of technology and how they do it, and it's in all different shapes and sizes and how they collect it, and unstructured and unstructured data. So that is the biggest thing, the training aspect of it. I think you just kind of hit the two aspects and why we're not necessarily progressing as fast as we should. And maybe it's good we kind of slow down to go faster, get better, do the planning, look at this stuff, do a deep research, read your reports as to what we should be doing. So What do you see as the most critical factor for enterprise IT leaders to consider when planning their investments in this technology for long-term innovation, value creation for the business? In other words, where do we make the investments to return the most value to the business right now? Or where should we be thinking about how we're going to do this now and in the future?
Definitely. So I think, based on our research, we have looked at over 20 different technologies and where the perceived ROI is from them. So I think the good news is investments in all of these data categories and even generative AI. So investing in data architecture will be very important. Data transformation will be very important in order to be able to feed these data hungry models. Traditional AI also is an area that has a lot of maturity where it doesn't need labeled data or unstructured data is easier to be handled by traditional AI. So I think also considering the critical differences in inputs and outputs that are really needed for a use case, and whether maybe you should be exploring a hybrid approach of traditional AI and generative AI. So I think a lot of investments in data to go a long way. And we say it all the time, but I think, cloud is critical here. Cloud and edge technologies of thinking about what that infrastructure cost structure looks like for AI infrastructure in the future, I think is a big area where our research shows a lot of investment and attention going.
Yeah, and it's definitely the path of least resistance as far as getting into AI, and that seems to be where the spending's occurring right now. And I think, but I think the on-prem guys are making some money as well. But obviously, ecosystem as a service and your ability to develop, deploy in something you're able to allocate in an afternoon is an incredibly powerful thing that cloud's able to offer, and is probably provide the scalability. We just have to manage the cost on the back end of the operational state. And there's ways to do that as well. I think people who get into cost trouble with cloud computing, you find there's not a lot of discipline and tools and FinOps tools that are in there. So this is going to have to go along for the ride, as well as security, governance, all the kind of things we need to re-engineer for this stuff. So where can the audience go for more information about you? I put a link to the report below. Where can they find the other reports? Where can they find you on social media?
So for our full collection of reports, you can go to Deloitte Insights, and the Center for Integrated Research has all of our reports. My work is under technology transformation there. So I would love for you to check it out. And on social media, LinkedIn is the best place to go. So Diana Kearns-Manolatos is a pretty unique name. I should be pretty easy to find.
I think it's a pretty cool name. Diana, this is an amazing experience for me, and it certainly should be for the audience as well. So we promise to point you to the people who know what they're doing and the people who are providing the pragmatic advice. Diana is one of those people. So please follow her and follow her research. Also follow Deloitte. Deloitte's doing some great research and some innovation in cloud computing and AI and cybersecurity and all those sorts of things. And so keep up with them. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but you check those out. So until next time, you guys stay very safe. I'll see you soon. Bye.